Anam Nawaz, and first of all, I'd like to welcome and thank everybody who's present today for taking out time on this weekend and being here to listen to a great talk by Professor Shaista. Before we formally begin the talk, I would like to tell a little bit about Academics Accessible and why we're doing this. Accessible Academics is an organization that has recently been started and is focusing on public scholarship and the idea that the public, the general public, needs to be aware of what's happening in the world, what's happening in the academic world. We all know that people who are enrolled in the universities learn about new courses, but people who are not enrolled in the universities, such as these kids right here, or mothers, or people who are not generally taking any courses anymore, where do they learn from? And I realized that there was a huge gap between the perspective that the young generation has today and the perspective that everybody else has today. Because when I came back after my Fulbright from the new school, I applied to numerous places and I found that there was this stinginess, there was this but this aggressiveness to a perspective, to a new perspective, to something that's different, to something that's new. And I thought that it may be because we as a nation have stopped learning. After we grow up and we go to we start our lives and get busy at work and at home and doing other things, we stop learning. We stop learning in the sense of academics. We stop doing theory anymore. And without a positive, a well-groomed theory that is in the West right now, our perspectives are becoming more and more tolerant because we're unaware of those. And this is one of the reasons I started Academic Accessible, because I wanted people such as Professor Shaista, such as Dr. Ghazala, such as other professors who've spent all their lives working on a specific field, in a specific direction, have been underrated in the sense that they're only confined to a university, only confined to their students. But the general people, they do not know about their work. And I wanted to highlight and acknowledge their efforts through Academic Accessible so that everybody, irrespective of being in a university or not, can still learn, can still have a chance to learn. So for this matter, I want to give a big shout out to Fulbright as well as USAFP, who have been able to fund 6 academic talks for us this time, as well as Daftar Khan, which is the place that you're sitting in, who is a co-host for us in organizing these events. I would now just give it over to Ms. Shaista, and I'm sure people know about her, but I'd like her to introduce herself and really talk about what she stands for tonight. Thank you very much. Dr. Shaista.
जी, मेरा नाम शाइस्ता सराजुद्दीन है जी, और मैंने तकरीबन 50 साल पंजाब यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ाया है और लाहौर में पढ़ाया है। मज़मून मेरा लिटरेचर है. It started as English literature, but then it became literatures in English. But over the years, I have been drawn to different subjects. And literature, the relationship between literature and the environment or ecology has been of special interest. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. I was told that paper reading was not really encouraged. However, I truly feel and I truly believe that this subject is so important that my intellectual and linguistic capacities should not be given free rein because they are limited. So I will be reading. But I hope that when I read, I also talk to you. Can you hear me at the back? Now I'm going to begin by drawing on an excellent book, excellent particularly for students, and that is the Eco-Criticism Reader, which has been edited by Cheryl Glotfelty. And in this introduction, she talks about how environmental and literary studies first began to be undertaken in the 80s and in the 90s. And basically, the word eco-criticism evolved from there, which is a study of the relationship between literature and the physical environment. For example, what role does the physical setting of a play, poem, or novel play in the work as a whole? How do our metaphors of the land influence the way we treat it? How have language and literacy affected humankind's relationship to the natural world? What one comes across throughout this discourse repeatedly are words such as cross-fertilization, relate, negotiate, and this leads on to the basic point that is being made, which gives you some idea about the nature of this subject, and that is that basically everything is connected to everything else. It is also an earth-centered approach to literature and literary studies, and it explores biological themes and relationships which shape works of literature. I'd like to begin with our own part of the world. Okay? I've done with Glotfelty now. Our land of the Indus. Truly, Mahasapta Sindhu. Khushwant Singh, who is, I use the word is because his work lives, brilliant man in many different ways. He has this wonderful work entitled Nature Watch, which I know several people here in the audience will be familiar with. He quotes from some of the earliest writers from the subcontinent, beginning with Ave Maraka, who is 3rd century BC. He is regarded as the earliest dramatist and poet. We then move on to Bharat Trihari, who is a 5th century poet and who describes the natural passage of days and years as a template for man's life. This is what he says. The cycle recurrence of sunset and dawn daily serves to measure life's decay. Man does not grasp time's fugitive flight. Seeing old age, pain, and death, he is not aroused to anxiety, drunk on delicious, heady wine. And I can't help but also quoting at this point from a 20th century poet, but who comes from Wales, and that is Dylan Thomas. In his poem Fern Hill, he writes, "Oh, as I was young and easy, in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sank in my chains like the sea." So this, I think, folds in rather well with Bharat preoccupation. We then have the example of Kalidas, great 4th century poet, who gives the season of autumn a human female form, calling it a maiden fair, in slenderness and grace, with nodding rice stems in her hair and lilies in her face. Guru Nanak then goes on into the 15th century, poet and saint, who describes his poetic calendars, the Baramasis, intertwining the seasons and human life. And again here, the Latin poet Virgil's Eclogues are of comparable interest, who is also comparable interest with our own tradition of the Baramasi. We move now to the 20th century. The 20th century Punjabi poet and dramatist Najm Hussain Sayyid, in recurrent patterns in Punjabi poetry, traces the journey from natural elements to poetic metaphors. The two elements are water and sand, where life begins and ends. The river and the desert. The river, Sayyid writes, was our great protector. It protected us against adventure and expansion, against our own dreams. It marked the limits of our parental realm. All institutions this side of the river had our containment as their principal objective. To the youth, the river was both a threat and a lure. The river is the fundamental challenge of their life. It is the primary hurdle in the way of growth, transformation, renewal, and rebirth. The desire to cross the river becomes an all-pervading ecstasy, irresistible. Ranja is the first to cross the river Channan. His brothers do not. This represents an existential commitment to discovering an alternative reality, to that of parental ties, heritage, institutions. When he recrosses the river, he is regressing to a mode of consciousness he had formerly revolted against, with its values of competitive production and possession. When he recrosses the Channan to go to Takht Hazara, he is no longer Ranja the Fakir. In the same way, the river Channan lies between Izzat Beg and his liberated self Mahiwal and Soni. In the story of Mirza, the river is replaced by the Bar, which is the desert or the wasteland. The Bar is treacherous, but he chooses to cross it and be united with Sahiba. When he recrosses it, he too regresses back to the old consciousness. Punnu's journey across the sands is a journey away from the safe world in a similar way. Sand, like water, is the element in which civilizations, as he says, begin and end. At the end of the burning sands, I'm quoting Najm Hussain Sayyid here, at the end of the burning sands, at the ultimate point imagined by the consciousness, beyond known experience, lives Sasi. Cast into the river as an infant, she represents the dynamic unknown, charting her own course, recasting and reshaping it. Both the river and the desert are potent symbols of the possibility of freedom, of dangerous choices, of challenges, of growth. I need perhaps not mention here that one is reminded of the ordeals which medieval knights, when they went out on quests, had to undergo, and the significance of these quests. The organic intimacy between the natural world and human beings, as we have evidenced from various texts, is confronted by an opposing tradition in literature where man and nature are seen in a constant conflict. By Shakespeare's time, there existed already a distinction between nature in its connotation of wild and nurture in its association with human intervention in controlling the wild and nurturing the tamed in the interests of utility, order, and beauty. In the 18th century, the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau draws an uncompromising distinction between nature, in which man is at his most natural and was originally rooted, and socialized or civilized man, forever expelled from that Garden of Eden. He calls human conscience the voice of nature. His belief that if we destroy the earth, we ultimately destroy ourselves has a profound logic and is echoed in the Red Indian chief Seattle's wise counsel to the white man. Teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our mother. If men spit upon the ground, they spit upon themselves. This reference is from Prisoners on a Bus, Travels Through Pakistan by Salman Rushdie. A man who stands unrivaled in expanding and enriching our common notion of travel writing. The estrangement from nature is seen by some writers as the basis of social and psychological ills. From the late 18th and 19th centuries, poets like William Blake, whose dark satanic mills despoil a green and pleasant land, to Wordsworth and Coleridge, there is a deeply troubled response to human intervention in the depredation of nature. The poet Ted Hughes, in 1970, in a journal entitled Your Environment, unequivocally cites capitalism with its exploitative relationship to the earth as both a cause and a symptom of such an estrangement. Once more, we are reminded of Chief Seattle's words, in which castigation comes with a warning. When he was approached by the white man in North America to sell the red people's land, the red Indians' land, this is what the chief had to say in response. He, the white man, treats his mother the earth and his brother the sky as things to be bought, plundered, sold like sheep or bright beads. His appetite will devour the earth and leave behind only a desert. And then, of course, he goes on to talk about teach your children what we have taught our children. Celebration, threat, and lament create a triadic rhythm in two writers I have chosen from very different climes and different times. The first is Salman Rushdie, who in his 212 article, Time to Sing the Amaltas, glories in the golden cascade of the blossoms at dawn, and of their scent writes, and I quote, "Whereas the Raat ki Rani drowns you, so you do not wish to rise again, the fragrance of the Amaltas is only just discernible. As it rides the breeze in undulating waves, it uplifts. It is a lilt in the air, a melody, and a dance that rolls like the waltz, as if it has oiled the very breeze that carries it." In an extract entitled Reflections upon Meeting an Ancient Tree from a different work, the author, while walking from Thandiani to Nathiagali, chances upon, and I quote, a local species of oak known as bruji. It turns out to be a very special tree, as its age is approximately 1,500 years. And it stands 100 foot tall and is 21 feet in girth. And this is what the encounter clearly, quite spontaneously, moves the writer to do. I grabbed its hefty girth in a hug and put my face against the lichen-covered trunk. I had not expected to hear the hum of sap coursing through its veins, and I didn't. But the moan of the wind through the trees became more pronounced, and from somewhere in the forest came the ugly thwack, thwack of another tree being hacked to death. The account closes with him wondering, could our tree hear that dreadful sound as well? I'd like to read a poem by a 19th century English poet, which I think has much in common with this. And this is, the poet is Gerard Manley Hopkins, and the poem is entitled Binzi Poplars. Binzi, incidentally, is a little village close by Oxford. My aspens dear, whose airy cages quelled or quenched in leaves the leaping sun, all felled, are all felled. Of a fresh and following folded rank, not spared, not one, that dandled a sandaled shadow, that swam or sank on meadow and river and wind-wandering, weed-winding bank. Oh, if we but knew what we do when we delve or hew, hack and rack the growing green, since country is so tender, to touch her being so slender, that like this sleek and seeing ball, but a prick will make no eye at all. Where we, even we, where we mean to mend her, we end her. When we hew or delve. Aftercomers cannot guess the beauty bean. 10 or 12, only 10 or 12 strokes of havoc, unselve the sweet especial scene, rural scene, a rural scene. So this is Gerard Manley Hopkins, who combines celebration of the poplars, but then there is also a lament. With the passage of evolution and human enlightenment, the need to bridge Rousseau's divide between the natural world and that of socialized man, armed as he is with knowledge and with the gift of language to express and mediate experience and observations, has acquired an urgency. If the planet is to continue to function, a new understanding of the relationship between these two is necessary. Such a relationship, writers believe, can be founded in an attitude of respect for the environment, a respect for its autonomy, for its otherness, which is balanced by our shared evolutionary history. And here I'd like to quote from a great naturalist, Richard Mabey. We need to work at gently joining our ancient shared senses more closely with our actions. That might be no bad ambition for our adrenaline-soaked culture. We badly need to find ways of juggling that simultaneous existence in our world and in nature. So this is Mabey. To achieve the transition from, as Robert Macfarlane explains, the perception exercised by the human self upon a natural object to a perception exercised upon the self by the object seems a good place to start from. The 19th century Northamptonshire poet John Clare and the 20th century South Country poet Edward Thomas both testify to the realization of this radical relocating. Furthermore, as is illustrated in Thomas's poem The Shieling, the elements of nature and the shaping of human activity can indeed negotiate a fruitful coexistence. I'm going to read Edward Thomas's poem. The Shieling. A shieling is a rough shack or hut out in the countryside. Basically, it is for the shepherd if it is the lambing season, but it is also used by whoever works on the land. So it's a very rough dwelling. It's not a house. It stands alone up in a land of stone, all worn like ancient stairs, a land of rocks and trees, nourished on wind and stone. And all within long delicate has been by arts and kindliness, colored, sweetened, and warmed for many years has been. safe resting there, men hear in the travelling air but music, pictures see in the same daily land painted by the wild air. One maker's mind made both, and the house is kind to the land that gave it peace. And the stone has taken the house to its cold heart and is kind. So, in this poem, excuse me, would you stop moving about, please? Sit down. In this poem, we can see how this divide between nature and human culture, and that includes language as well, is bridged. Because in this poem, the natural elements and the little shieling and the fruits of human labor and creativity are able to coexist. Bear with me, this is quite complicated, this whole palanda of papers. Okay. Great naturalist writers continue to inspire us. Not only do they renew our flagging awareness about the human and moral significance of the ethics of environment, their analysis and at times chastisement is an all too necessary tempering of our tendency to be inattentive at best and downright callous at worst. Jonathan Bate, elaborating on the American naturalist Thoreau's advisory phrase, to live deliberately, writes, to live, that is to say, with thoughtfulness and with attentiveness, an attunement to both words as in the use of as in the sense of of the use and repository of human beings, and an attunement to both words, which is in the orbit of human beings, and the world as in the natural environment around us. And so to acknowledge that although we make sense by way of words, we do not live apart from the world. For culture and environment are held together in a complex and delicate web. So he's using words in their association with human beings and human culture. And when he talks about the world, he's talking about the natural world. And of course, the need for these two to coexist. And indeed, the fact that an affirmation in his writing for the fact that culture and environment are held together in a complex and delicate web. Now, in case you are beginning to feel overburdened by eloquent advice and exhortation, the natural world goes a long way in supporting us in our endeavors, and it does so by its sheer commitment to survival. Here I would like to refer to a unique and innovative narrative entitled The Comedy of Survival by Joseph Meeker. Mika takes the two literary genres of comedy and tragedy, and he applies comedy to nature. And he describes how, he talks about how comedy evolved. Comedy, the word comedy, probably comes from the name of the god Comus. Now, Comus was a god of fertility. Fertility in the human world, fertility in the natural world, in the plant world, and in the animal world. He also is the god of the family, of the community, but at a very basic sense, in a very down-to-earth sense, if you like. And as Mika points out, he leaves high intellectualism to the god Apollo. So, comedy, Mika believes, with its spirit and with its spirit of flexibility and adaptability and a resilience that underpins survival, is what he feels can be fruitfully applied to a study of nature and the natural environment. This view finds affirmation in Richard Mabey's observation that the natural world survives by renewal and serendipity and an inborn tenacity. It reminds us of our own physicality, of sharper, simpler vitalities. Mika also, he's the one who introduced the term literary ecology, which he described as the study of biological themes and relationships which appear in literary works. The comic, according to Mika, speaks truths that relate to the deepest parts of human nature. Comedy moderates, as he puts it, healthy relations among people and the earth's natural processes. It connects us with other species through shared evolutionary history. So there we have Mika. ਜੇ ਕਦੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਾਲ ਰੋਡ ਤੇ ਗਏ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪੁਰਾਣੀਆਂ ਇਮਾਰਤਾਂ ਢੱਠੀਆਂ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਢੱਠੀਆਂ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਛੱਤਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਪਿੱਪਲ ਦੇ ਦਰਖਤ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦਿਸਣਗੇ. And when I look at them, I'm reminded of something that I'm going to read. And this is a poem by a grandmaster, the Nigerian Chinua Achebe. And the poem is entitled Mango Seedling. Through glass window pane up a modern office block, I saw 2 floors below on wide jutting concrete canopy, a mango seedling newly sprouted, purple, 2-leafed, standing on its burst black yoke. It waved brightly to sun and wind between rains, daily regaling itself on yam seeds prodigally. For how long? For how long the happy waving from precipice of rain-swept sarcophagus, How long the feast on remnant flower at pot bottom? Now, HEB's mango seedling eventually perishes. But I'm glad to report that our little people trees live on to fight the new Lahore another day. I'm going to now bore you because it's my hobby horse. Just for 2 minutes. It's much longer for me, but. And that is the way that we ourselves stand witness, and we should be aware of this, to the way that we are and have destroyed our own city, the same city where we are today sitting in. And how in this city, amongst one major aspect of depredation has been the way that trees have been ruthlessly cut down in the interests of underpasses and flyovers and so on. And I think that we should bear witness. ये जो शहादत देना का जो नोशन है ना, ये ज़रूरी है, इम्पोर्टेंट है. और हम कैरेक्टर बिल्डिंग के बारे में अक्सर बात करते हैं. हर वक्त बताया जाता है कि जी कैरेक्टर बिल्डिंग होनी चाहिए स्टूडेंट्स की, और आपके करिकुलम में ऐसी टेक्स्ट होने चाहिए जो कैरेक्टर बिल्डिंग हो. लेकिन जहाँ एक इंसानी एथिक्स का ताल्लुक है उसके बारे में कोई बात नहीं होती, क्योंकि जाहिर है जो आप कैरेक्टर जिस तरीके से जब आप डिफ़ाइन करते हैं तो वो आप बिल्कुल उसको एक पाकिस्तानी यानी ढांचे में आप उसको महदूद रखते हैं. तो मैं यही समझती हूँ, और क्योंकि आप लोग उर्दू मेरी कुछ कमज़ोर है, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਚੋਂ कुछ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ न मेरे जिन्ने बजुर्ग नहीं पर कुछ बहुत जवान न, तो मैनू उस तरह अच्छा नहीं लगता कि मैं ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਵਾਂ कि जी तुसी हुशियार होवो. पर बेसिकली दैट इज़ व्हाट आई एम सेइंग. होशियार होने की ज़रूरत हम सबको है. और ये जो मैंने राइटर्स आपको मेंशन किए हैं, चाहे वो हमारे अपने इलाके से हों, चाहे वो और इलाकों से हो, उन सब ने एक लिहाज से यही कहा है अपने मुख्तलिफ़ तरीक़ों में. I'd like to end with 2 passages that I think can reaffirm our hope in humankind, and perhaps you can take back with you and it will sustain you. In his latest book, A Time of Madness, A Memoir of Partition, Salman Rushdie recounts an occasion when, while being driven to his ancestral village in East Punjab by a Sardar, Bakshish Singh, he saw a large peepal tree in the middle of a busy road, with traffic passing on both sides of it. And when playing devil's advocate, he suggests to his companion that the tree be axed for greater convenience. The man is appalled and says, Bhaiji, you may get away killing a man, but never even talk of destroying a tree. And finally, I'd like to read a short passage from Robert Macfarlane's Wild Places. So beautiful, moves me to tears. I chose to sleep in the deep grass of the upper meadow. I lay in the warm darkness, breathing in the scents of the field brought out by the gentle dew that had settled after nightfall. I could hear the ongoing business of the meadow, the shifting of grass stalks, the shy movements of animals and insects, and again I felt a sense of wildness as process, something continually at work in the world, something tumultuous, green, and joyous. Thank you very much.